Good morning. I'm Rebecca Farnbach, and we are here at the Vale Ranch headquarters. This is a charming spot that some of us worked really hard to save, and I hope that you will enjoy it. It has shopping here, but it also has some good time fun. You can bring the kids out. We put little games out on the grass, and they can frolic while you enjoy a glass of wine at Chef Flavor or beer from the pizza parlor called Vale Pizzeria. Let me tell you a little bit about this place if you haven't been here before. I like to think that this is one of the most charming places in Temecula. You know, this is older than Old Town Temecula. The store that I'm sitting in was built in 1866 by Native Americans, and it was the first store in Temecula. We are sitting alongside the old Butterfield Stagecoach Trail. This was the only road into Temecula, and the room that we're in recording this is the old hotel room. There were actually about 5 of the hotel rooms along this side of the building, but they were used as the first hotel in Temecula. Let's go back in time a little bit. I like to use my fingers, that way I don't have to have paper. The first era of this property is the Native American era. Then we go to the stagecoach era, to the ranching era, and then to modern day. And you see the modern day, it's obvious, but we have put up some commemorative plaques throughout the property to help you understand what the other eras were. Wherever you see an old-fashioned wagon wheel, you will look down and find a piece of granite, Temecula granite, mined from the hills here over 100 years ago, and there will be a commemorative plaque stating what the building that you're looking at was used for back in the day. So, in the Native American era, this would be prior to 1798. There was no one here but Native American people. One day in 1798, 2 padres from the San Luis Rey Mission crossed over the gap between the mountain range near Rainbow Gap, and they discovered the verdant valley of Temecula, situated right near the Temecula Creek. So there was plentiful water, waterfowl, and vegetation for the Native Americans to feed upon back in the early days. Well, as people came through, they found this little trodden path, and it widened. Actually, it became a wagon road in 1846 when the Mormon Battalion came through. In fact, the 49ers found it. It was the only year-round route to the gold fields. You know, if you go farther north, you get stuck on the Donner Pass, and you know, the snow was too deep, the mountain range is too treacherous. But this southern trail became known as the Southern Immigrant Trail, and a lot of people passed through Temecula on their way to the gold fields or anywhere else they were going in the wintertime coming to California. You know, along came a storekeeper. There was a federation of Jewish entrepreneurs coming over from Europe, and one man named Julius Zabinski and his son set up this store here. Well, it was also the time of Mexican banditos, and they were robbing people right and left, and in fact it was said that Juan Murrieta would know that they were coming, and he would butcher a sheep and hang the meat out on his gatepost so the banditos would not harm him or his family. Julius Zabinski didn't do that, and his store was broken into, it was robbed, and he was mortally wounded. A man took his place here, and this man lended his name to the store, which we all know today as the Wolff store. Louis Wolff was a German, and he was also Jewish. He had come out to California to work in the gold fields. But he eventually found that the best way to make money in California was to run a store. He was working up in Warner when he found out that this store was available to him. So by July of 1867, he and his, as they say, half-Indian wife, Ramona, took residence here. They built a little house next door, and they had the store that had been Julius Sabinski's. So they ran the hotel, they ran the general store, and they put a post office in here, in this building. This was Temecula. There was no other Temecula. There was no Old Town. What we now call Old Town came about in 1882 when the railroad came through and businesses sprang up to be closer to the railroad. So when what we call Old Town was built, it was called New Town because this was Temecula. So Louis Wolff and his wife Ramona made a huge impact on the area. Louis, besides being postmaster, was justice of the peace, so he performed marriages, and they offered hospitality to visitors along the trail. They had their hotel rooms here open to visitors for a small fee. They fed them. They took care of the horses while they stayed there. It was quite a business, and they were pretty wise in how they managed things in this western frontier. One of the visitors here was Helen Hunt Jackson. She was a literary dame from back east. She encountered colleagues like Thoreau and other people with ideas that would shake our world and change things forever. Helen Hunt Jackson asked the United States Congress for an assignment to come here to Southern California to study the plight of the Native American people who she felt had been greatly wronged in their eviction from their homelands and their placement on reservations. She came here and stayed right here on this property, the Vail Ranch headquarters today. She stayed here as a guest of Louis and Ramona Wolff. It took her 2 days by horse and wagon to arrive here from Oceanside, so she was weary when she arrived. But when she heard the stories that Ramona Wolff told her, she was mesmerized. So Helen Hunt Jackson went ahead and wrote her book, a very thick, scholarly book that was very boring and few people have ever read it. It's called Century of Dishonor. Some of us buy that book just because it's remarkable, because it brought her here to Southern California, but we don't read it. It's way too boring. But what she did write that has changed things, changed our culture, was the book Ramona. There's no small coincidence that the book is named Ramona. There are actually 3 different people who Helen Hunt Jackson modeled Ramona after. You may know that her book has never been out of print since its first printing in 1886. You may also know that in Hemet, California, they have been running a pageant with that story since 1926. It has gone every year since then. The story continues to inspire and convict the souls of the people who observe them. So the story is a Native American man who was just doing his duty to take care of his wife and baby was gunned down in cold blood because he was Native American. It's a tragic story. It's a true story, but her whole book is fiction based on fact. And she got the information for that book here. We're going to turn the page a little bit on history and tell you about another era of influence at this location. So we talked about Wolff's, and we talked about, how important they were and how the railroad came in, and there was another location then for the new Temecula that we now call Old Town. What was happening out here at the ranch during that time? Well, there were several people who bought up some of the land around here. During the Mexican occupation of this area, so when it was under the flag of Mexico, prominent citizens were given land grants, and the Temecula Valley was divided up into 4 major land grants. We're sitting in the Little Temecula grant. To our east is the Pauba, P-A-U-B-A, Pauba, Native American for pear tree. North of us is the Temecula Rancho, and then to the northwest is the Santa Rosa. In 1904, Walter Vale bought up all of those, well, most of the land of those 4 ranchos, and he cobbled it together in a huge cattle ranch that he called the Vail Ranch. Unfortunately, Walter Vale died shortly afterward. He was in Los Angeles conducting business, and he was crushed between 2 trolley cars in his hurry to exit. So his family formed the Vale Company. He had 5 children and his wife who remained, and they divided up the many responsibilities of this ranch, one that they owned in Arizona near Tucson, and other land holdings that they had and businesses, including the Santa Rosa Island in the Channel Islands. The one who eventually took over this ranch was his son Mahlon, M-A-H-L-O-N, different name, but that was his name. And he was here until 1964, when this entire ranch was sold. 87,500 acres in 1964 was sold for a mere $23 million. When you look around at property values today, that's unbelievable. When they sold in 1964, they sold to Kaiser Aetna, who did the planning for a community called Rancho California. They indicated areas for citrus groves, for grapevines, for avocados, for horse ranches, and for smaller tract of homes divisions. So that's the story of Rancho California. In 1989, we residents voted for cityhood, and we restored the name Temecula, the original name, to this area and formed the city of Temecula. Actually, the native name is Temecu. Temecu means the place where sun touches sand. Now, this area sat dormant for a number of years. We just spoke about cityhood 1989. It didn't include this area. This was still county area. About 1996, when this whole area was just a few buildings on a flat plain of unused land, some people started to complain about the broken down buildings and maybe they should just be eradicated. Well, some of us historians really got concerned. We thought, shouldn't happen. These buildings need to be saved. After all, think of all the footprints of history that are upon this property, from the Wolff store and the Vale Company, the Native Americans. Just didn't seem right. So we formed a nonprofit organization called the Vail Ranch Restoration Association. We were determined to save the historic buildings and to set aside the property as a heritage park. You know, the thing about heritage is, if you have a legacy item and it goes away, it doesn't come back. You've got one chance to do it right, or it doesn't happen. You can't take away the Wolff store and build it again. You can't replace all the layers of history. You can't take away Louis and Ramona's house that later became the cookhouse for the Vale Company and build it again. You can't take away the bunkhouse where the cowboys lived. The old Wolff store is now a coffee shop and ice cream shop. It brings a lot of people in. It's wonderful. The old cookhouse is going to be a food mall. There will be 4 different food vendors. There will be a common sitting area and a little bit of a retail shop with logo items from the Temecula area. Also, the old bunkhouse houses a charming saddle shop and Vale Pizzeria. We have a new building. We needed a little bit more income for this property, so we allowed the developer to put in a new building that is structured to look like an old mule barn that burned down in 1929. We have the pictures and presented that, and it's beautiful. And it now houses 6 different businesses. We also have a bread machinery barn that is going to be home to a brewery. So we are so happy. We've outlined the Butterfield Trail here on the property. We have a performance stage where we have live music often. People come, people enjoy being here and strolling. And I have to believe that when they step through this property, looking at it, their imaginations go wild. They can imagine the wheels turning on the stagecoach road at the horses' feet, and they can imagine the people who have come through here and who have lived here. The Wolff store adobe is brought back to life. When Louis and Ramona Wolff closed it in approximately 1895, it basically sat empty until 2016 when it became a coffee shop. And once more, the joy of footsteps on the porch are there. And this is a place where you can all come to enjoy it. I hope you will enjoy your visit to Vale headquarters. And you can find us online and on Facebook, Vale HQ. You can also find the Temecula Valley Historical Society and the Vail Ranch Restoration Association. Thank you for viewing this film.